Well, Harry, thanks that you're here.
Yes, great.
At PQR's IT Galaxy. It's an honor to have you here. It'll be fun as well.
Yeah,
but we'll see later on. Yeah. Can you briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Harry Labana. I'm CTO for the desktop division at Citrix. I've been here just over a year and having a whale of a time. So certainly the shift from customer to vendor has been a journey, but it's been good.
What's your background? What did you do prior to Citrix?
I spent the last kind of like 14, 15 years on Wall Street. I'm originally from London. I moved to New York, so I've been kind of implementing Citrix and Windows and desktop virtualization infrastructure, virtualization infrastructure. So certainly have been a vocal customer of Citrix's, and I guess the best way to shut me up, frankly, was to bring me on this side, right? So yeah. Cool. So
suppose you're in have a nice meeting with friends, and a friend asks, "What are you doing? What is Citrix? Explain Citrix in 20 seconds to a spouse."
Yeah. So I guess the easiest way to explain Citrix is we're about trying to find new ways of IT and people to work. And what that does is, and how we accomplish that is through what we call virtual computing. And what virtual computing is all about is enabling business transformation, right? So how do you make businesses more efficient? How do you make them more agile? And how do you position them for growth? So it's all about, Citrix is about virtual computing.
Okay. What is Citrix's vision on data center / cloud?
Well, I think it's important to kind of step back for a second, right? When you think about data center and cloud, and try and ask yourself, well, what's actually happening? And I think the first belief that we have around cloud is that what's happening, that the world is going from this very static, underutilized data center to something that's more dynamic and self-service. And I think around that, 4 kind of core belief systems that we believe in, that the data center and cloud has to be about being open and having open standards there. It has to be about partnering with people, because we alone as one vendor are not the cloud. We don't believe that having something like that works. We think partnering with folks in the kind of ecosystem who build specialized solutions is absolutely key. And then we also think that cloud is a series of technologies, and we think virtualization and networking together are critical components to enable the cloud moving forward.
Okay. When you look at the complete stack of vendors like Citrix, distributors,
yes,
especially in Europe, partners like PQR, end users, customers, how do you see that stack when you look at long-term vision of cloud, of IT as a service, of self-service? What does it mean for companies like PQR? What does it mean for distributors in Europe?
Yeah. So if I understand your question correctly, I think there's a couple of things from a cloud perspective. I think nobody really wants to be a clone of one vendor's specific implementation, whether it's us, whether it's some of our competitors. So I think a lot of the I guess service provider industry, they want to find ways to continue to add their own IP differentiation right into their stack. So when they come to the cloud infrastructure providers such as ourselves, they're looking for commoditized technology that they can use and they can deliver on a consumption basis. I think from a service perspective, when people like yourselves and others, I think it's really about trying to kind of educate customers on how to actually get to the cloud. What are the workloads? What are the processes? What are the technologies?
So integrator. So the eye of integration.
Yeah.
That's huge. That should be huge.
I think it's a large opportunity, but I also think, and I'll bring this up. I think if you think about data center maturity, most data centers, I mean, let's be honest, right? Yeah. They're a mess. They're a bunch of wires and servers.
So maturity model.
The maturity model. Yeah, but I think typically, and I like to talk about it in Europe especially, right? We talk a lot about ITIL, right? Yeah. ITIL V1, ITIL V2, and V3. When are people actually going to implement that? I think the question we have to ask ourselves is that the right model? Is ITIL actually holding us back when it comes to cloud, right? Yeah. Because it's a very IT-centric view of the world. And perhaps we need to take a different view on how that becomes. And I think that's a great discussion to flush out at some point.
Different topic. What are Citrix strengths? That should be easy. But also, what are Citrix weaknesses? Room for improvements.
Sure. So I think, look, the strengths are pretty well understood. It's we've been doing this user workspace delivery, let's just call it, right, for 20 plus years. So we're entrenched in 250,000 plus customers. We're really good over the WAN. We've grown that portfolio to networking, SaaS-based collaboration.
You understand the desktop?
Yeah, we understand the desktop. We understand application delivery. We understand networking. We understand collaboration as well. So we've grown those assets. So I think we come from a position of strength, and also buying Zen Server and moving into the cloud, I think has really helped us as well. Now, weaknesses, I think one of our weaknesses is that I think it's mind share. Because I think our success is sometimes our greatest Achilles heel. Because when people think about Citrix, and I'll give you an example. Sometimes people who don't really know us well, when I ask them, well, what does Citrix do? This is a stranger I meet on a plane or at the airport. And they say, oh, you're those go-to guys. Right? Go to my PC, because in the US we have a fairly large advertising campaign. Some people think, oh yeah, you're those ZenApp guys,
the old school MetaFriend guys.
The MetaFriend guys.
Yeah.
So I think we suffer from some of that, and I think we have to, continuously educate people that what we actually do. And then I think it's also important for us to continue to educate people that we're more than VDI. So I think explaining what we call FlexCast and multiple models of desktop virtualization. So that's kind of where I think, where we have to continue to improve, and also getting people to understand that our core kind of go forward motion, which is desktop virtualization, is not really coming from the data center out. It's coming from the user back into the data center. And I think it's a very different perspective on how you manage servers and how you deliver user experience.
How do you see the virtual desktop inside the data center evolve in the next 1.5, 2 years?
Sure.
From functionality point of view, end user point of view, TCO, technology stack?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things. I think the immediate challenges now that I hear from customers is we're getting ready to do Windows 7 deployments. Help us get better at implementing and migration there. And so I'm sure you're going to ask me some scoops on synergy, and I think you'll certainly hear a lot of thought about and partnerships that we'll probably announce on how we can help people actually accelerate. So that's key. I think we have to be prescriptive, because I think, to be honest with you, and I was one of those early customer adopters, a lot of people have kind of invented VDI at home and done it their own way. It's customized, or they're just kind of brute force, typically very strategic forward-looking customers. But as we drive mainstream, so migration is going to be key. Now going beyond that, what are some of the other things? I think as you think about the broader context of desktop virtualization, is it app delivery in the future? Does it go back to apps, right? Does it go back to mobile devices, locally executed and hosted? What about Zen client? So better integration between all of that stack, SaaS-based delivery. What happens to network identity? What happens to identity itself, right? Is it seamless and transparent? How do you go from the enterprise data center and extend to the virtual data center? So I think all of that stuff begins to happen. And then I think management becomes disrupted. Right? There's a new way of doing things. How to support and services. What happens to help desks? How do you support a virtual desktop? Right? What do you need to know? What do you need to see? Right? So I think there's a lot of innovation.
What kind of thing on the storage level? Well, one of my colleagues, Herco, written a document called VDI and Storage's Deep Impact. Yeah. We've seen it ourselves. Yeah. How do you see that change in the upcoming years?
Yeah, so I think, I/O, right? So I think you guys have done some fantastic work there, is still a challenge. However, when you kind of step back and you look at what people are actually implementing versus what people are writing about on blogs, I think the people actually implementing are predominantly doing one-to-one deployments. So they've got more than enough disk to handle the I/O, and because they're doing it for the benefits of centralization, agility, etc., right?
But the business case for lowering the cost for a traditional normal desktop is
and that's right for innovation. So I think my view on this personally, and there's a lot of talk, right? So do you use some sort of cache block appliance, right, in the middle from various vendors? Do you use SSD, which I think is potentially still a high price point? My personal belief that the future is about local storage and distributed file systems that become native to the hypervisor. Because my view is, if you think about the cloud, do I really think the cloud is going to be this big thing that's going to require millions of storage appliances? I just don't think the economics are there. So I think we can put cheap commodity storage in servers themselves from various vendors.
Even with the benefit of central storage, so migration stuff.
Right,
and those
right. So I think file system-based, distributed file system-based, local storage solutions that work natively into the hypervisor, I think is really the future. And we just announced.
I can imagine some vendors, but that's
I think specifically, we just announced last night actually the beta of Zen Server Cowley. And there we're beginning to do some things with how storage is optimized. So cache things locally, and all the persistent state put that remotely. Yeah, so you can see where we're actually going with this. Yeah.
From Project VRC perspective, we will do some benchmarking with this feature pack 1. Yeah. And we'll see what the performance impact improvement is. We'll see. What are your thoughts about Project VRC?
Well, I think it's great what you guys do. So I haven't read your latest report.
It was released yesterday, so that's
so I've been flying, but But look, I think for us that we've pretty much standardized internally as a core benchmark on VRC. I think it's important from a customer perspective to kind of get to truth, right? Because I could publish a benchmark that's biased or weighted towards mine, and our competitors could do the same. So I think it's important to, from my perspective, to allow folks like yourselves, right, and for us to be involved in the discussion as well, to say, look, gives customers truth, right? And I think customers on top of that should do their own validation as well, and for their own specific workloads.
So it should be smart to grow it even further than all Citrix and Microsoft and HP, but make it a more
industry standard. I think so. I'm supportive, and hence, I think you're presenting at Synergy in Berlin next week, in San Francisco. I would say, why aren't you not presenting at VMware?
Yeah, good question.
Right. So. So I think it should be an industry standard.
Yeah, cool. Well, thanks. Thanks for your time, Harry.
Okay, thank you.
Have a nice day.
It's good to see you again.
See you later.
Okay, bye-bye.